So our project today is about wetlands. And what do you think a wetland is?
Wetland?
I'm sure I don't know. I'm asking you to tell me.
Like a swamp or a marsh.
This is the first time I hear about it.
Wetlands,
Marshes, ponds,
lakes and bogs.
any place where you get waterfalls.
The lower areas where water collects from rainwater, snow melt.
Ducks and
Probably an environment where there's lots of water and wildlife around that water.
living and geese. And
A wetland is where there are species of animals.
Somewhere in outside the city where you have a mixture of water and land.
Going out to the country, having a good time with some friends, camping, that kind of thing.
Wetlands are loosely defined as areas that have standing water for a period of time, several weeks or more, ranging from very temporary to very permanent, and everything in between.
You know how much of Alberta is covered in wetlands?
Nope.
I would have no idea.
No idea.
I don't know.
4%, 5%.
No, probably like 30% or something.
10%?
Actually higher. It's actually 20% of Alberta's. Yeah.
About 40% of northern Alberta, so what they call the green zone, which is the mainly still forested area of Alberta, about 40% is covered by wetlands.
Do you know how many species depend on the wetlands?
A lot, probably.
Probably hundreds.
Wild guess, I'd say 500.
Thousands?
No, I can't say, but I should think that a lot of species of animals will depend on wetlands.
Oh, there must be quite a few. I wouldn't guess. I'm afraid there are too many.
There are many species that are completely dependent on wetlands in some parts of their life cycle. That's why they're important for a lot of animals and plants, and that they cannot exist without them. They are certainly one of the most productive ecosystems on the planet. And this is because they have lots of nutrients, they have lots of light, access to light, they're often warm, and so you get very high production. I actually sit on a committee that looks at it, that does the status of of endangered species in Alberta. And ones that actually have conservation status in Alberta there's probably 15, but these are the ones that are truly legally protected. In terms of things that are viewed as of conservation concern in Alberta, there are probably, of wetland-related species, probably more like 50, I would guess.
In Alberta, what percentage of marsh wetlands have declined in settled areas? What do you think the number is?
20%?
I can't really answer that. I'm not quite sure.
I'd say 50%.
It's actually 64% of the wetlands have disappeared.
The most important issue for wetlands right now in Alberta is continued loss of wetlands. We have, for about the last 50 or 60 years, seen about a 0.3% loss rate per year across the province, which doesn't sound like a big number, but expressed as acres, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of acres lost. Perhaps the second most important is to restore wetlands that we have lost, to try and make back some of that lost ground. The loss of wetlands and what its impacts are can probably best be explained by making an analogy with our own personal health. You can live with one kidney, you can live with impaired function of your liver, and that would be an equivalent to having reduced some of the wetland capacity of a watershed or landscape's function. But the fact is, it's going to reduce how well you thrive and probably how long you live.
Destruction and degradation are still the biggest problems, and have been for the last 100 years. We don't think of this often, but one of the biggest effects that any sort of industrial activity has is the creation of roads. The creation of roads hugely affects areas, because if you put a road in, you have access to the area by people for hunting, fishing, whatever. You put a road in, invasive species can travel up the road. You put a road in, you fragment the habitat. So in some cases, you can have a larger effect by putting in that road than you can say by taking out the trees and logging it.
Do you know what wetlands actually do for you as a person?
I can't say as I do.
I guess they help the ecosystem with whatever it's doing. I'm not too knowledgeable on these things, but
It helps me to have wildlife around, and I know that hunters like having wildlife around, but
I have no idea.
The importance, well, of course, we need wetlands to sustain the environment.
Give us better drinking water, cleaner drinking water.
Do you like having clean air?
Yes.
Do you like having clean water?
Yes.
Do you like your basement being dry?
I don't have a basement, but if I did, yes.
I think it's just nice to have that wildlife in the community.
Wetlands provide many values. Wildlife or biodiversity values is one of the obvious ones. Wetlands are hugely important parts of collecting surface water and managing surface water, purifying that surface water, flood attenuation.
Another reason why wetlands are important is they do what are called ecosystem services on the landscape. And in particular, this is in terms of water quality issues. Wetlands are often a site for purification of water sources. Basically think of a sewage lagoon at a sewage treatment plant. Water quality issues are very much tied into wetlands.
I mean, if we don't have a good ecosystem, I mean, this will probably just dry up into a desert or something.
If wetlands were to completely disappear in Alberta, what would happen? What would be the consequences of that?
Oh, well, it would certainly affect, I mean, it would have major effects on the hydrology and, larger scale water issues. And of course, water is a big issue in Alberta. And it could become a bigger issue if things get drier. There would probably be various larger scale land cover changes, likewise larger scale, probably potentially even climatic changes. It would affect agriculture too, because many farmers do use natural wetlands for their cattle, in particular for cattle watering. So a lot of the primary production, that is carbon dioxide that's been captured from the atmosphere and put into plant tissue, does not break down, and it's trapped in the sediments in the peat, so it doesn't go back up into the atmosphere. There's concern with things like burning of peat or destruction of peatlands, of releasing all, again, that carbon that's been trapped there for thousands of years in many cases into the atmosphere.